Caleb Brooks drove into the mountains looking for quiet, the kind that didn't ask questions. Wyoming in late fall had a way of swallowing sound. Snow clouds hanging low, pine trees standing like old men who'd seen too much and learned to keep it to themselves. The gravel road climbed higher with every mile, slick with sleet, the headlights of his battered pickup cutting a narrow tunnel through the dark. Beside him, Rex sat upright on the passenger seat, a retired K9, scarred muzzle, eyes that never truly rested. The dog didn't sleep much anymore. Neither did Caleb. He wasn't running from anything in particular. That's what he told himself. After 20 years of service, after the last deployment that took his team and left him standing alone, he'd learned that some losses didn't explode. They just hollowed you out. He took the ranger job for the isolation, the cabin for the distance. No city noise, no news cycles, no people asking how he was holding up. The heater rattled, the windshield iced at the edges. Caleb tightened his grip on the wheel, feeling the familiar ache in his left shoulder, where old injuries lived rent-free. He checked the clock. Still an hour from the cabin. Still an hour from silence. Then, the night ahead of him flickered. Headlights. Too fast. Too close. A white sedan skidded sideways out of the snow, tires screaming as they lost the fight against gravity. Caleb didn't have time to curse. Training took over. He slammed the brakes. The truck shuddered to a stop, just as the sedan clipped the guardrail. Metal tore. Glass burst. The car vaulted over the edge. For half a second, the world held its breath. Then came the sound. Deep, violent, final. As the vehicle vanished down the mountainside, Caleb's heart kicked hard against his ribs, a sensation he hadn't felt in years, the kind that dragged you straight back to places you swore you'd left behind. Rex let out a low growl, nails scraping against the seat, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the guardrail. "Not our business," Caleb muttered. But his door was already open. Cold air rushed in, sharp, biting. Snow stung his face as he grabbed the flashlight. Smoke rose from below. Not much time. They moved fast. Halfway down, the smell hit them. Gasoline, hot metal. Something burned, and wrong. Inside the wreck, something moved. Then he saw her, a woman, curled across the back seat, wrapped in white satin, now streaked with blood and ash. A wedding dress. Her eyes were open. "Hey," Caleb said, steady, calm. "Time 700. Stay with me. I've got you." Her fingers locked onto his sleeve. "It wasn't an accident," she whispered. "He cut the brakes." Caleb froze. Just long enough. "Who did?" he asked. "My fiancé," she said. "He wanted me dead." Fire crept closer. They cleared the wreck. Just as the engine gave in, the explosion lit the mountainside. Heat slammed into Caleb's back as he shielded her. When the night went quiet again, she was still shaking. "Can you walk?" he asked. She shook her head. "Then listen to me," Caleb said. "I'm getting you out of here." She swallowed. They'll come for me. They'll come for me. The words followed Caleb all the way back up the slope. He didn't answer her right away. He shifted her weight in his arms, adjusted his footing, and focused on the simple mechanics of movement. Step, pull, breathe. Rex stayed close, circling once, twice, then taking position behind them. Eyes locked on the darkness below as if daring it to follow. Snow fell harder now, thick flakes melting against the heat still rolling off the wreckage. The mountain smelled like burned rubber and pine sap, a sharp, bitter mix that lodged in the throat. Caleb reached the road, set her down gently against the pickup, and slammed the door open. "Get in," he said, slowly. She obeyed, wincing as she moved. The dress caught on the seat, heavy and ruined. Caleb grabbed a blanket from behind the cab and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric immediately darkened where blood soaked through. He shut the door, then turned back toward the guardrail. Rex stood there, hackles raised, staring into the trees. "Easy," Caleb murmured, though his own pulse hadn't slowed. He scanned the road. Empty. No headlights. No engines. Just wind and snow. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the truck, and pulled away before the mountain could change its mind. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The road wound downward, tires crunching over ice. The heater blew lukewarm air that smelled faintly of oil and dust. Caleb kept his eyes forward, hands steady, the way he'd learned when emotions threatened to hijack judgment. She broke the silence with a soft, involuntary sound. Half sob, half breath. "My name's Emily," she said. "Emily Carter." Caleb nodded once. "Caleb." She glanced at Rex in the rearview mirror. The dog met her gaze without blinking. "He saved me," she whispered. Caleb didn't correct her. The cabin lights appeared through the trees 20 minutes later. A faint glow in a world gone white. Caleb parked behind the structure, killing the engine. The quiet that followed was heavy, unnatural, like the pause before another impact. He helped Emily inside. The cabin was small, utilitarian, wood stove, one table, one couch. The place smelled of smoke and old coffee. Caleb guided her to the hearth, knelt, and fed kindling into the stove until flames caught, until warmth began to breathe into the room. Emily stared at the fire, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. "You're safe," he said. "Time 900. Though the words felt thin, Rex lay down between her and the door, head on his paws, ears forward. Every time the wind hit the cabin walls, his muscles tensed. Caleb grabbed a first aid kit from a shelf and knelt again. "Let me see." She hesitated, then nodded. He cut away part of the dress, careful not to look where he didn't need to. The cut on her arm was deep, but clean. The bruising along her ribs was worse. "You're lucky," he said, wrapping gauze. "Could have been a lot worse." Emily laughed once, hollow. "Funny," she said. He said the same thing. Caleb's hands paused. Who? He asked, keeping his tone neutral. Nathan, she said. My fiancé. She swallowed. We were supposed to be married this morning. Denver. Big venue. His parents spared no expense. Rex shifted, letting out a low sound that vibrated through the floorboards. Emily hugged the blanket tighter. I found something. Papers. Transactions. I didn't even understand most of it. Just enough to know it was bad. When I told him I was going to the police, he smiled and said I was tired. Emotional. She looked up at Caleb, eyes red, unblinking. The brakes failed an hour later. Caleb leaned back on his heels. He'd heard variations of that story before. Different accents, different wars, same ending. Why here? He asked. I didn't know where else to go, she said. I just drove. I thought if I could get far enough away. Her voice cracked. They'll come, she said again, quieter now. Nathan won't stop. His family won't stop. Outside, something snapped in the woods. A branch, or a footstep. Rex rose instantly, a deep growl rolling out of his chest. Caleb stood, every nerve awake. He reached for the old knife on the counter, eyes on the door. Emily, he said, low, controlled. Listen to me. She looked at him. If what you're saying is true, he continued, then this isn't over. The fire popped. Wind pressed against the cabin walls. And neither am I, Caleb finished. Rex's growl deepened, steady, unyielding, as if he already knew what was coming next. The wind howled through the trees like it was carrying voices with it. Caleb didn't move for several seconds. He stood there listening, not just with his ears, but with the instincts that had kept him alive long after luck ran out. The cabin creaked. Snow tapped against the windows in uneven rhythms. Rex remained planted in front of the door, body rigid, a low warning vibrating through his chest. Emily followed Caleb's gaze, her breath shallow. Is someone out there? She whispered. Maybe, Caleb said. He didn't like lying, but he liked panic even less. Could be nothing. It rarely was. He crossed the room and checked the rear window. Just darkness and falling snow. No lights, no movement. Still. The feeling sat heavy in his gut. The unmistakable pressure of being hunted. Caleb latched the shutters and lowered the blinds, then turned the lantern down low. Shadows pooled along the walls, the fire becoming the only living thing in the room. Emily watched him closely, as if memorizing every motion. You do this like it's normal, she said quietly. Caleb shrugged. Old habits. She swallowed. You're not scared? Caleb considered the question. I'm careful. Emily looked down at her hands. They were shaking again. Blood had dried along her knuckles where she'd clawed at the door of the wrecked car. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, she said. That I was being dramatic. That's what Nathan always said when I questioned things. Caleb leaned against the table, arms crossed. He didn't interrupt. He controlled everything, Emily continued. Money, schedules, who I talked to. He called it protection. Said the world was dangerous and he was keeping me safe. Her mouth twisted. Funny how that works. Rex shifted closer to her, resting his chin against her knee. Emily startled at first, then slowly lowered a hand to his head. The dog stayed still, accepting the touch like a solemn vow. He knows you have something, Caleb said. Emily nodded. I hid it. A drive. I stitched it into the lining of the dress when I realized he was watching my phone. That caught Caleb's attention. Smart. I was terrified, she said. But I wasn't stupid. A sudden sound cut through the room. A faint crunch outside. Snow underweight. Rex's ears snapped forward. Caleb's posture changed instantly. He moved to the door, pressing his ear against the wood. Another sound followed. Slow, deliberate. Someone was out. There. Caleb stepped back, his voice barely above a breath. Lights off. Emily obeyed without question. The cabin sank into near darkness, firelight flickering like a nervous heartbeat. A knock came. Soft, controlled. Emily? A man's voice called from outside. Calm. Familiar. Her face drained of color. That's him, she whispered. That's Nathan. Caleb didn't respond. He signaled Rex with 2 fingers. Stay. The knock came again, firmer this time. Emily, I know you're in there, the voice said. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Rex let out a low, dangerous growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Caleb stepped forward. You're trespassing, he said loudly. Turn around and leave. A pause, then a laugh, soft, amused. And you must be the hero, Nathan replied. Listen, pal, this is a family matter. I'll give you $5,000 to walk away. Cash. Emily's breath hitched. Caleb smiled, though Nathan couldn't see it. You're underpaying. Another pause. The humor vanished from Nathan's voice. You don't know who you're dealing with. Caleb opened the door just enough for the cold to rush in. Snow swirled around Nathan Hale, standing alone in an expensive coat that didn't belong in the wilderness. His eyes flicked to Rex, then back to Caleb. I know exactly who you are, Caleb said. A man who cuts brakes instead of telling the truth. Nathan's jaw tightened. She belongs to me. Emily gasped. Caleb felt something dark and old stir in his chest. No, Caleb said, voice hardening. She doesn't. Nathan's gaze slid past him, locking onto Emily. His smile returned. Thin, sharp. Emily, he said, come outside. We can still fix this. Rex stepped forward, teeth bared. Caleb moved fully into the doorway. Last chance. Nathan studied him for a long moment. Then he raised his hand slightly, backing away. This isn't over, he said calmly. You can't protect her forever. He turned and disappeared into the snow. Caleb shut the door and bolted it. Emily collapsed against the wall, sobbing, her knees giving out. Caleb crouched beside her, unsure what to say. Rex pressed in close, steady, warm. Outside, the wind howled louder, as if the mountain itself had heard the threat and taken it personally. Caleb stared at the door, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. Nathan Hale had just declared war. This isn't over. Nathan's words seemed to seep through the cabin walls long after his footsteps vanished into the storm. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat at the small kitchen table, back to the wall, rifle resting across his knees, eyes fixed on the windows as snow thickened outside. Rex remained alert, pacing slow, deliberate circles. Every so often, he stopped and pressed his nose to the door, as if measuring the distance between safety and danger. Emily sat curled on the couch, wrapped in blankets that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. Her sobs had quieted, replaced by a hollow stare into the fire. She hadn't moved since Nathan left. "He'll bring others," she said at last. Her voice was steadier now, stripped of panic and left with something harder. "Nathan never does things himself. He hires people." Caleb nodded. "I figured." The wind shifted. Somewhere beyond the trees, an engine hummed. Low, distant, then gone. Caleb stood. "We leave at first light." "Where?" Emily asked. "Anywhere he isn't expecting." Morning came gray and heavy. The snowstorm hadn't passed. It had settled in, swallowing the mountain in white silence. Caleb packed fast. Medical kit, ammo, radio, a rugged GPS unit issued years ago and never returned. Emily changed into spare clothes that hung loose on her frame, leaving the ruined wedding dress folded on the cabin floor, like a shed skin. Rex watched her the entire time. They moved out before sunrise, slipping into the forest behind the cabin. The trail Caleb chose wasn't marked, an old ranger route rarely used, winding through dense pine and rock outcroppings. Snow reached their calves in places, slowing them, stealing warmth with every step. For the first mile, they heard nothing. Then Rex stopped. His body went rigid, tail low, ears angled forward. Caleb crouched instantly, scanning ahead. Emily followed his lead without being told, breath fogging in quick bursts. "Someone's out there," she whispered. Caleb listened. At first, only wind. Then, a faint crunch, out of rhythm with the forest. He raised 2 fingers. "Wait." A black SUV crested the ridge behind them, headlights off, moving slow and patient. Another appeared to the left, cutting off the trail. "Damn," Caleb muttered. Gunfire cracked through the trees. Bark exploded off a trunk inches from Caleb's head. He shoved Emily down behind a fallen log as another shot tore through the snow where she'd been standing. "Stay low," he shouted. Rex was already moving, silent, fast, a blur of muscle against the white. A man in dark winter gear stepped into view, rifle raised. He didn't see Rex until it was too late. The dog slammed into him, teeth finding fabric and bone, dragging him down with a growl that sounded more like rage than instinct. Caleb fired twice, controlled, forcing the shooters to scatter. He grabbed Emily's arm. "Move, now!" They ran, slipping and stumbling through powder so thick it burned the lungs. Emily fell once, cried out, and was back on her feet before Caleb reached her. Fear had sharpened her, stripped away hesitation. Another shot rang out. A round tore through Caleb's sleeve, grazing skin. He didn't slow. They broke into a narrow ravine, the ground dropping steeply on both sides. Rex rejoined them, blood on his muzzle, not his own. He glanced back once, then pressed forward, leading them through brush so dense it clawed at their faces. At the far end of the ravine, Caleb stopped short. A third SUV blocked the exit. Nathan Hale stepped out into the snow, perfectly composed. Dark coat pristine despite the storm. He didn't carry a weapon. He didn't need to. "You're making this expensive," Nathan said calmly, "and unnecessary." Emily stepped forward, shaking with fury. "You tried to murder me." Nathan sighed as if tired of repeating himself. "I tried to protect my family." Rex growled, a deep rolling sound that echoed off the rocks. Caleb raised his rifle. "Walk away." Nathan smiled thinly. "You don't understand the kind of money involved here. Real estate, private equity, charitable foundations. This is generational." She was a liability. Emily laughed once, sharp, broken. "I loved you." "That was your mistake," Nathan replied. A shot rang out from behind. Caleb turned just in time to see a gunman emerge from the trees, aiming straight at Emily. "Down!" Caleb shouted. Rex didn't wait. The dog launched himself sideways, colliding with Emily hard enough to knock her off balance. The bullet hit Rex instead. The sound wasn't loud, just a dull, final thud. Rex hit the snow and didn't get back up. "No!" Caleb yelled, the word tearing out of him. Emily screamed, crawling toward Rex, as blood spread fast against the white ground. Impossibly bright. Caleb fired, dropping the shooter before he could chamber another round. Nathan took a step back, shock flickering across his face for the first time. Rex whimpered softly, breath coming in shallow bursts. His tail twitched once. Caleb dropped beside him, hands shaking as he pressed pressure against the wound. "Stay with me," he said, voice breaking despite himself. "Stay with me, buddy." Emily sobbed, clutching Rex's head. "He saved me!" she cried. "He saved me!" Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Someone had called it in. Nathan stared at the scene, calculation replacing arrogance. He turned and ran. Caleb didn't chase him. He couldn't look away from the dog bleeding in his arms. Rex's eyes met his, still clear, still loyal. And for the first time in years, Caleb prayed. What do you think should matter most in moments like this? 1. Justice. 2. Survival. 3. Loyalty. Comment 1, 2, or 3 below. Stay with me. Caleb's voice was hoarse, scraped raw by cold and panic. He pressed both hands against Rex's side, feeling the warmth of blood soak through his gloves. The snow beneath them darkened, spreading outward like an ink stain he couldn't stop. Rex breathed in short, uneven pulls. His eyes never left Caleb's face. Emily knelt opposite him, hands shaking as she tried to help, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Please, tell me what to do." Caleb forced himself to think. Not feel, thinking was how you survived. "Pressure," he said. "Just pressure. Don't let go." Sirens grew louder, then faded again as the wind shifted. Too far, too slow. Caleb tore open his jacket, ripping free a compression bandage he carried out of habit more than hope. He wrapped it tight around Rex's torso, pulling until the dog let out a low sound. Not a whine, just acknowledgement. "Good," Caleb murmured. "That's it. You're doing good." The words felt familiar, too familiar. They dragged Rex into the trees, out of the open ravine, using Caleb's coat as a makeshift sled. Every movement hurt. Every second stretched thin. Emily stumbled more than once, but she didn't stop. She didn't look back. They reached an abandoned ranger shack. No power, no phone line. Just four walls and a roof barely holding together. Caleb kicked the door in and laid Rex down near the back wall, away from the wind. Emily knelt beside them, breath hitching. "Is he going to die?" Caleb stared at the wound. He'd seen worse. He'd also seen less turn fatal. "I don't know," he said honestly. The truth hung between them, heavy and unforgiving. Caleb pulled out his satellite phone, the one he'd sworn never to use again. His thumb hovered over the contact list, stopping on a single name. Mason Reed. He hit dial. The line crackled, then connected. "If this is a prank, it's me," Caleb cut in. Silence, then, "Where are you?" "Wyoming," Caleb said. "Northern Range, I need you." Another pause. Longer this time. "What happened?" "My dog's been shot." Emily watched Caleb's face as the words landed on the other end. Whatever Mason said back, it stripped something loose in him. "I don't care," Caleb snapped. "Time 1,300 malms. I don't care what you're doing or where you are. You owe me." A sigh. "Send coordinates." Caleb ended the call and slumped against the wall, exhaustion crashing in now that movement had stopped. Emily wrapped another blanket around Rex, whispering to him like he could understand every word. "I'm sorry," she said. "This is my fault." Caleb shook his head. "No. This is on him." He stared at his hands, still red despite the cold. For a moment, the shack disappeared, replaced by desert heat and dust, by the sound of rotors and gunfire, by the weight of bodies he couldn't carry out. "I promised myself I was done," he said quietly. "No more missions. No more people to save." Emily looked up at him. "But you didn't leave me." Caleb met her eyes. "I didn't leave him." Rex shifted, letting out a faint breath. His tail moved, just barely. Emily gasped. He's still fighting. Yeah, Caleb said. His throat tightened. He always does. Headlights cut through the cracks in the shack an hour later. Mason burst through the door, medical kit already open, eyes sharp and focused. Damn it, Caleb, he muttered. You always do this. He worked fast, efficient, practiced. Emily backed away, giving space, watching every move like it mattered more than her own heartbeat. After a long, terrible stretch of time, Mason leaned back. He's alive, he said, but it's bad. He needs surgery. Now. Caleb closed his eyes, letting the relief hit him hard and fast. He nodded once. Tell me where to drive. As they loaded Rex into the truck, Emily stood there, snow swirling around her, smaller than she'd been hours ago, and somehow stronger for it. Nathan Hale was still out there. The evidence was still hidden in her dress lining. The fight wasn't over. Caleb climbed into the driver's seat. Hands steady now. Something inside him had shifted. The man who'd come to these mountains to disappear was gone. The one driving back down was someone else entirely. Someone who remembered exactly how to fight. And why. The road south cut through miles of frozen wilderness. The pickup's headlights carving twin scars through the dark. Rex lay in the back, wrapped in blankets, an oxygen mask fogging faintly with each shallow breath. Mason worked beside him, steady hands checking vitals, calling out numbers that kept Caleb anchored to the present. Emily sat up front, silent, staring at the windshield as snow streaked past like falling ash. Her fingers worried at the hem of her coat, where the hidden seam still held the small, hard shape stitched into the lining. What is it? Caleb asked without taking his eyes off the road. She hesitated, then reached inside and pulled out a compact encrypted drive, no bigger than a thumb. This, she said. This is why he wanted me gone. Mason glanced up. That little thing? Emily nodded. Nathan's family runs half the commercial developments along the Front Range. Luxury condos, senior housing, charitable construction projects. But the money doesn't match the permits. I'm an interior designer, but I grew up around blueprints. When I noticed structural changes that made no sense, I started digging. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen that kind of operation before, clean on the surface, rotten underneath. They're laundering money through non-profit real estate, Emily continued. Tax shelters, offshore accounts, shell companies tied to construction insurance claims. If this gets out, it doesn't just ruin Nathan. It brings down his father, his partners, everyone. Mason let out a low whistle. That's federal. That's why he panicked, Emily said, and why he sent men into the mountains. The truck hit a patch of ice and slid, just long enough for Caleb's heart to spike before he corrected. He exhaled slowly. You didn't go to the police. I tried, Emily said, but every attorney I called told me the same thing. Without protection, I'd be crushed by legal fees before I ever saw a courtroom. Nathan's family keeps entire law firms on retainer. Mason snorted. Welcome to America. They reached the small regional medical center just before dawn. Nurses rushed Rex into surgery, while a tired-looking administrator asked questions about liability and payment. Caleb answered them all without blinking. He'd signed worse contracts under fire. In the waiting room, Emily finally broke. She folded in on herself, hands over her face, shoulders shaking. Caleb sat beside her, saying nothing. Just there. After a long minute, she spoke. I thought marrying him meant security, she said. Health insurance, a future, a life where I didn't have to worry. I didn't realize I was trading freedom for a cage. Caleb nodded. A lot of people do. She looked at him. Why are you helping me? He thought about the question, about the mountain road, about Rex throwing his body into the line of fire. Because walking away would have killed something in me that was already on life support. Hours passed. Mason paced. Emily slept sitting up. Caleb watched the doors. When the surgeon finally emerged, mask hanging loose around his neck, Caleb stood. He'll live, the man said, but recovery will be long. Surgery, physical therapy, medical bills. He'll never be what he was. Caleb nodded once. He doesn't need to be. They moved Rex to a recovery bay. The dog's eyes opened briefly when Caleb knelt beside him. A faint thump of tail. Still here. Later that morning, Mason set up a secure laptop on a plastic table. If you're doing this, he said, you do it right. We upload the data to a federal server and contact a whistleblower attorney I trust. Legal help. Witness protection if needed. Emily swallowed hard. Once this starts, there's no going back. Caleb looked at her. There never was. Outside, snow melted into slush as the sun climbed, revealing tire tracks circling the hospital lot. Too neat. Too deliberate. Rex stirred, a low warning rumbling from his chest. Mason followed Caleb's gaze. They found us. Caleb's hand went to his jacket. Then we stopped reacting. Emily straightened, fear giving way to resolve. She held up the drive. I'm done running. Caleb met her eyes. So am I. Somewhere beyond the glass, an engine idled. The truth was out now. No longer buried beneath snow and silence. And once it surfaced, it would demand a price from everyone involved. So am I. Caleb's words barely faded before the hospital doors slid open again. This time, not with nurses, but with two men in tailored coats that didn't belong in a rural ward. They moved with the quiet confidence of people used to being obeyed. One of them scanned the room. The other checked his phone, then looked up. Rex's low rumble grew deeper. Mason followed Caleb's line of sight. Those aren't locals. No, Caleb said. They're scouts. Emily tightened her grip on the drive. Nathan. Or his father, Caleb replied. Same difference. Caleb stood and walked toward the men before they could decide to come to him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply occupied space, broad shoulders, steady eyes, a presence that made people reassess their choices. "Visiting hours are over," Caleb said. One man smiled politely. "We're here for Ms. Carter. Family concern." Emily rose behind him. "I don't have family," she said. "Not like that." The smile thinned. The man's eyes flicked to Rex, then back to Caleb. "This doesn't need to be difficult." Caleb leaned in just enough. "It already is." Security approached from down the hall, alerted by Mason. The men backed off, retreating with practiced ease. As the doors closed behind them, Caleb exhaled slowly. "They'll regroup," Mason said. "This was a feeler." "Then we move now," Caleb replied. They didn't wait for paperwork. Mason pulled strings. Hospital admin, emergency transport, a favor owed from a malpractice case settled years ago. By noon, Rex was cleared for transfer under strict conditions. By dusk, they were gone. The route took them west, away from Denver, away from expectation. The pickup rolled through open country where cell service flickered and disappeared. Caleb drove without music, without conversation, counting miles the way he once counted steps on patrol. Emily finally broke the silence. "I've never been hunted before." Caleb didn't look at her. "You're doing fine." That's not comforting. He almost smiled. They reached a safe house after dark, an old farm property Mason had access to through a real estate holding company that specialized in distressed assets and foreclosure prevention. The place was plain, forgettable, paid for in cash. Inside, Mason set up a temporary workstation and began the upload process to a secure federal server. Encrypted, verified, redundant. Emily watched the progress bar creep forward. "Once it hits 100, they can't bury it," Mason said. "Federal agencies, Financial Crimes Unit, Real Estate Fraud Task Force. This triggers audits, subpoenas, asset freezes. Think long-term consequences." Outside, headlights swept the tree line. Rex growled, struggling to rise. "Easy," Caleb said, resting a hand on the dog's shoulder. "I've got this." Caleb moved to the window. 3 vehicles fanned out along the dirt road, 2 coordinated for coincidence. One engine idled low. Patient. Nathan Hale stepped out of the lead SUV, coat buttoned, hair immaculate. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "Emily," Nathan called. "We can still talk." Emily's hands trembled, then steadied. She stepped beside Caleb. "You tried to kill me." Nathan sighed. "I tried to contain a problem." Caleb stepped forward. "Leave." Nathan's gaze hardened. "You think this ends with an upload? With some government attorneys?" "My family has survived recessions, investigations, hostile takeovers. We adapt." Rex barked once, sharp, defiant. Caleb raised his weapon, not aiming, just enough to make a point. "You're on private property," Caleb said. "Back away." Nathan studied Rex, then Emily. "You've chosen poorly," he said softly. He turned and signaled. The woods erupted with movement. Gunfire cracked the night open. Mason cursed and dragged the laptop to the floor, shielding the upload. Caleb returned fire in controlled bursts, forcing the shooters to spread. Rex lunged from the doorway, teeth bared, intercepting a man rushing the porch. Emily crawled to Mason. "How long?" "2 minutes," Mason shouted. "Keep them off us." Caleb moved like memory had taken over. Angles, cover, timing. He wasn't angry, he was precise. A bullet shattered a headlight. Another sent a gun skidding into the dirt. Nathan retreated toward the SUV as sirens wailed in the distance. State troopers, alerted by Mason's silent alarm tied to the property deed. Nathan's composure cracked for the first time. "This isn't finished," he called. Caleb didn't answer. The upload completed. Police lights washed the farm in red and blue. The attackers scattered. Nathan vanished into the trees. But the net was closing now. Paper trails, warrants, financial disclosures already in motion. Emily sank to the floor, shaking with relief. Rex limped back inside and collapsed beside her, breathing hard, but alive. Caleb knelt, resting his forehead briefly against Rex's. "Good work," he whispered. Outside, engines died. Doors slammed. Voices shouted orders. The hunt had begun. But not the way Nathan intended. The emergency ward smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Clean, sharp, unforgiving. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flattening time into something endless and pale. Caleb sat in a plastic chair beside Rex's recovery bay, one hand resting on the metal rail, the other clenched tight enough to ache. Rex lay motionless, except for the steady rise and fall of his chest. Tubes and wires traced paths over his fur, like a map of survival. Every soft beep from the monitor landed in Caleb's chest, counted like a second chance. Emily stood near the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. She hadn't slept. None of them had. The adrenaline from the farm had burned off, leaving behind a quiet that felt heavier than gunfire. "He jumped without thinking," she said softly. "Didn't even hesitate." Caleb nodded. "That's who he is." A nurse passed, glanced in, then moved on. Outside the glass, orderlies pushed carts. Life kept going. It always did. Mason leaned against the wall, tapping at his phone. "Federal agents are inbound," he said. "Financial crimes, real estate fraud, insurance manipulation, the whole package. This thing just went nuclear." Emily exhaled shakily. "And Nathan?" "Missing," Mason replied. "For now." Caleb didn't react. His focus stayed on the dog who'd put himself between danger and the people he chose. Hours later, Rex stirred. His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then locked onto Caleb. A faint thump. Tail against the mattress. Caleb leaned in. "Hey," he said quietly. "You scared the hell out of me." Rex's ears twitched. The monitor steadied. Emily stepped closer, tears spilling freely now. She reached out, then stopped, unsure. Caleb nodded permission. She laid her hand gently on Rex's shoulder. Thank you, she whispered. I'm here because of you. Rex huffed, as if the words embarrassed him. The surgeon returned before dawn, eyes tired but calm. He'll recover, he said, but there's nerve damage. Physical therapy, long-term care. Medical expenses won't be small. Caleb stood. I'll handle it. Emily looked at him. That's not your burden. Caleb met her gaze. He made it his. Later, as Rex slept again, Emily finally allowed herself to sit. The room felt different, quieter, but not empty. She pulled the encrypted drive from her pocket and turned it over in her hands. I used to think protection meant walls, she said. Money, contracts, insurance policies, health coverage. Now I know better. Caleb listened. Protection is someone who stands between you and what's coming, she continued, even when it costs them. Caleb nodded once. That lesson doesn't come cheap. Outside, snow melted into slush along the curb. Morning traffic began to hum, delivery trucks, commuters, ordinary life brushing past the edge of something extraordinary. Mason checked his watch. Agents will want statements, lawyers too. This becomes depositions, hearings, years of legal proceedings. Real estate assets frozen, trusts audited. It's going to get ugly. Emily straightened. I'm ready. Caleb studied her. She wasn't the woman he'd pulled from a wrecked car anymore. She stood taller now, steadier, as if the worst thing that could have happened already had, and she'd lived through it. Rex shifted again, letting out a soft, contented sound. Caleb rested his hand against the warm fur, feeling the slow, stubborn pulse beneath. For the first time since the mountains, Caleb felt something ease inside him. Not relief. Time 1,900 mems. Not peace. Purpose. Rex hadn't just saved a life. He'd drawn a line. One Caleb realized he'd been standing on all along. When danger came again, and it would, Caleb knew exactly where he'd stand. Right there. Between. Rex was still asleep when the federal agents arrived. They came quietly. No sirens, no spectacle. Dark sedans easing into the hospital lot like they belonged there. 2 men and a woman in plain clothes stepped inside, badges revealed only after doors closed. Financial crimes. Interstate fraud. Their presence carried a different kind of weight, the slow gravity of consequences that couldn't be outrun. Caleb watched them through the glass, one hand resting on Rex's flank. The dog's breathing was steady now, deeper than it had been all night. A small victory, the kind you learn to measure in inches. Agent Laura Kim introduced herself with a firm handshake and tired eyes. Mr. Brooks, Ms. Carter, we'll be brief. Emily straightened. I'm ready. They moved to a quiet conference room down the hall. Mason joined them, laptop under his arm, already anticipating questions. Caleb stayed by the door, arms crossed, listening more than speaking. Emily told the story without drama. The engagement, the projects, the irregularities, the drive. Her voice shook once, early on. then found its footing. She spoke like someone who'd decided fear no longer got to write the ending. Agent Kim nodded as Emily finished. "Your cooperation puts you at risk," she said. "But it also puts Mr. Hale and his associates in serious jeopardy. We're freezing assets tied to their real estate holdings as we speak. Commercial developments, senior living investments, nonprofit construction funds. This will ripple." Emily swallowed. "And Nathan?" "Missing," the agent replied, "but not invisible. Financial pressure has a way of flushing people out." Caleb glanced toward the hallway where Rex lay. Pressure. He understood that language. By noon, the hospital buzzed with quiet activity. Lawyers on phones, administrators whispering, a news van parked discreetly across the street. No names yet. Just speculation about a high-profile financial investigation involving construction fraud and attempted homicide. Emily sat beside Caleb again once the agents left. "They want me in protective custody." Caleb nodded. "Makes sense." "I don't want to disappear," she said. "Not like before. I want to be present for this. For him." She gestured toward Rex's room. Caleb considered her words. "Presence has a cost." "I know," she said. "I've already paid part of it." Mason approached, hands in his pockets. "There's more," he said. "Nathan Hale tried to cross state lines last night. Rental vehicle, fake ID. Highway patrol flagged him near the Utah border." Emily closed her eyes. Caleb felt a tension he hadn't realized he was carrying finally ease. "They have him," Mason continued. "Pending extradition. Attempted murder, obstruction, federal fraud. Bail will be ambitious." Emily laughed softly, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. "He really thought he could outrun this." "People like him usually do," Mason said, "until they can't." That evening, Caleb wheeled Rex down the corridor for a short walk, IV pole rattling beside them. The dog moved stiffly, favoring his injured leg, but his head stayed high. Nurses smiled as they passed. Someone called him a hero. Caleb shook his head. "You hear that?" he murmured. "They're putting labels on you." Rex's tail thumped once. Emily walked alongside them. "What happens now?" she asked. Caleb thought about the cabin, the mountain, the life he'd tried to abandon. "Now we heal," he said, "and then we decide what's worth rebuilding." They stopped at a window overlooking the parking lot. Snow had stopped falling. The world looked temporarily honest. Wet pavement, time 4:50 Mstang, gray sky, no illusions. "I don't know what my future looks like," Emily said, "but I know what it isn't." Caleb met her gaze. "That's a start." Back in Rex's room, the dog settled onto the bed with a tired grunt. Emily pulled a chair close, resting her hand near his paw without touching, giving him space the way you do with something precious. Caleb stood at the foot of the bed, watching them both. For years, he'd lived by one rule: survive alone. It had kept him breathing, but not much else. Rex had broken that rule. Emily had finished breaking the rest. Outside, the news cycle would spin. Court dates would be set. Financial advisors would scramble. Lawyers would bill by the hour. Medical expenses, insurance claims, long-term care, real problems, real costs. But in that quiet room, one truth held steady. No one was being left behind. The courtroom in Denver smelled faintly of varnished wood and old paper. Records stacked on records. Decisions layered over decades. It was the kind of place where lives changed quietly, with the soft thud of a gavel instead of gunfire. Emily sat at the witness table, hands folded, shoulders squared. She wore a navy blazer borrowed from Mason's sister. Simple, deliberate. No jewelry, no distractions. The scar on her forearm was faint, but visible when she adjusted the microphone. She didn't hide it. Caleb sat 2 rows back with Rex at his feet. The dog lay still, back leg braced, eyes alert. His vest marked him as a service animal, though everyone in the room understood he was more than that. Caleb rested one hand lightly on Rex's shoulder, grounding himself in the steady warmth. Across the aisle, Nathan Hale sat beside his legal defense team. 3 attorneys in tailored suits that cost more than most people's annual insurance premiums. Nathan looked smaller than he had in the mountains. Not weaker, just diminished. The confidence was still there, but it flickered now, like a bad investment. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Proceedings moved with methodical precision. Charges were read. Attempted murder, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, money laundering tied to nonprofit real estate development. The words stacked up. Heavy, undeniable. Nathan's attorneys objected often. Procedure, scope, relevance. But the judge listened patiently and overruled when it mattered. Emily was called. She walked to the stand without looking at Nathan. When she raised her right hand to swear the oath, her voice didn't waver. She told the story cleanly. No embellishment. No tears. The engagement. The design projects. The numbers that didn't line up. The threats framed as concern. The brake failure explained away as an accident, until it wasn't. When the prosecutor asked about the drive, Emily nodded. I verified the files myself. Construction invoices, shell companies, insurance claims routed through charitable foundations. It was designed to look like affordable housing and senior care development. It wasn't. The defense attorney rose, smooth, confident. Ms. Carter, isn't it true you were under stress? Wedding planning, long hours, financial pressure. Emily met his gaze. Stress doesn't cut brake lines. A murmur rippled through the gallery. He tried another angle. Jealousy, misunderstanding, emotional instability. Emily answered each question calmly, like someone who had already survived the worst thing that could happen. When the attorney suggested she'd exaggerated danger for attention, Caleb felt Rex tense beneath his hand. He leaned forward slightly, eyes hard. Emily smiled once, not kindly. If I wanted attention, she said, I wouldn't have run into the mountains to disappear. The judge called for order. By the time Emily stepped down, the room felt different, heavier, quieter. The prosecution rested. The defense requested bail, citing community ties, assets, private security assurances. The judge removed her glasses and looked directly at Nathan Hale. "Mr. Hale, your resources make you a flight risk. Your alleged actions demonstrate disregard for human life." She paused. "Bail is denied." The gavel struck. Nathan's face finally cracked. Not anger, fear. Caleb exhaled slowly. Rex's tail tapped the floor once. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions about real estate fraud, corporate accountability, legal liability, and insurance coverage for victims. Emily declined comment, stepping into a waiting vehicle arranged through the Witness Protection Program. Caleb walked her to the door. "You did good," he said. She shook her head. "I did necessary." Rex nudged her hand gently. She knelt despite the cold marble steps and pressed her forehead to his. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb watched her leave, then turned back toward the courthouse. The fight wasn't fully over. Appeals, motions, civil suits, medical bills to sort, years of rebuilding ahead. But something fundamental had shifted. The truth had weight now, and it was finally pressing in the right direction. The drive back to Wyoming felt longer than it should have. Not because of distance, but because the noise was gone. No sirens, no radios, no engines idling in the dark. Just the steady hum of tires on asphalt and the wide open land stretching out under a pale winter sky. Caleb drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the edge of Rex's crate in the back seat. The dog slept, drugged lightly for the pain, his breathing slow and even. Emily watched the landscape roll by. Empty fields, distant fences, the kind of space that made room for thinking whether you wanted it or not. "It's strange," she said quietly. "I thought I'd feel relief, closure." Caleb kept his eyes forward. "Most people do." "I don't," she admitted. "I just feel quiet." Caleb nodded. "That's the part nobody warns you about." They reached the cabin just before dusk. The place looked smaller than Emily remembered, almost fragile against the mountain, snow piled along the porch rail and roofline. Caleb cut the engine and sat for a moment, listening to it tick as it cooled. Rex stirred when the door opened. He lifted his head, timed 350s, ears twitching, and gave a low huff. Recognition. "Home," Caleb said. Inside, the cabin smelled of cold wood and old smoke. Caleb lit the stove. Methodical. Familiar. Emily set water to boil, hands moving on instinct now. Not fear. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Rex was settled near the fire, wrapped in blankets, his injured leg supported. He watched everything, even half asleep, as if making sure the world stayed where it was supposed to be. Later, Emily sat at the table, laptop open but untouched. Legal emails waited. Civil suits, restitution claims, insurance settlements tied to Nathan's frozen assets. Words like compensation and liability stared back at her, sterile, impersonal. Caleb poured coffee and slid a mug toward her. "You don't have to answer any of that tonight," he said. She nodded. "I know. I don't want to be the woman who runs anymore." "You're not," Caleb said. "Running has an end. You already reached it." She studied him for a long moment. "What about you?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He stared into his mug, watching steam curl and vanish. "I thought I came up here to disappear," he said. "Turns out I was just waiting." "For what?" He glanced at Rex, then back at her. "For a reason to stay." The wind rattled the windows gently. Snow fell in soft, unhurried sheets. No threats, no footsteps. That night, Emily slept on the couch, wrapped in blankets that smelled like pine and firewood. She dreamed. But the dreams didn't chase her. They passed like weather. Caleb sat awake a while longer, cleaning a rifle he hadn't fired since the farm. When he finished, he locked it away. The sound of the latch clicking shut felt final. Rex shifted, letting out a contented sigh. Morning came slow and gray. Emily woke to the sound of Caleb chopping wood outside, the rhythmic thud steady and grounding. Rex lay near the door, tail thumping weakly when she moved. She stepped onto the porch, breath fogging. "You don't have to do everything alone," she said. Caleb leaned on the axe handle. "I know." She hesitated, then added, "I'm thinking of staying. At least for a while." He met her gaze, searching for uncertainty, finding none. "You're welcome here." They stood there together as the sun pushed weakly through cloud cover, lighting the snow in muted gold. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for the first time since the mountain road, the silence didn't feel like danger. Morning in the mountains didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly, the way honest things often do. Pale light crept across the snow, touching the treetops first, then sliding down the cabin walls until it reached the porch. Emily stood at the window, mug warming her hands. Steam curled upward, carrying the faint smell of cheap coffee and wood smoke. For the first time in weeks, her shoulders weren't hunched. The world outside looked unchanged. Same ridgeline, same frozen creek. But something inside her had shifted. Caleb came in from the cold, boots dusted with snow. He set the axe by the door and shrugged out of his jacket. Rex lifted his head from his blanket, tail tapping twice against the floor. "Physical therapy appointments confirmed," Caleb said, pouring himself coffee. "Local vet clinic partners with a regional animal healthcare network. They know what they're doing." Emily smiled faintly. "Good insurance?" Caleb snorted. "Let's just say it's better than what I had in the service." Rex huffed, as if amused. Days began to find a rhythm. Slow at first, then steadier. Caleb guided Rex through careful exercises on the packed snow. Short walks, controlled turns, patience measured in minutes instead of miles. Rex hated the leash, hated the brace on his leg even more, but he endured it with stubborn dignity. Emily found herself useful in small ways. She reorganized the cabin, not changing it so much as softening its edges. A chair angled toward the light, shelves cleared of clutter, space reclaimed. It wasn't designed for profit or prestige. It was designed for breathing room. One afternoon, she set up a makeshift workstation at the table, sketching ideas for remote consultation work, interior layouts, adaptive living spaces, sustainable cabins for older clients looking to downsize without giving up independence, affordable housing concepts, safe rooms hidden in plain sight. Caleb watched her from the doorway. "You're building again." She nodded. "This time it's mine." The town took notice slowly. Word traveled the way it always does in small places, through hardware stores, veterinary clinics, quiet conversations over coffee. People asked about Rex, about Emily, about why a former Navy SEAL had come back from Denver with a limp dog and a woman who looked like she'd lived 3 lives in a month. Caleb didn't explain. He never had. A week later, a local ranger stopped by with paperwork. Time 200 masters permits. Trail access requests. Seasonal fire prevention notices. Practical things. Life things. "You staying?" the ranger asked Emily, friendly but curious. Emily glanced at Caleb, then back at the ranger. "For now." That night, snow fell again. Soft, steady. They ate in silence. Beans, bread, something warm enough to matter. Rex lay between them, chin on his paws, eyes half-lidded, but alert. "I got an email," Emily said after a while. "A settlement offer. Civil suit. Insurance coverage tied to Nathan's frozen assets. It's more money than I've ever seen." Caleb looked at her. "What will you do?" She considered the question carefully. "Pay off debts. Set aside medical funds. Maybe help others who don't have the resources to fight people like him." Caleb nodded. "Sounds right." She hesitated. "And you?" He leaned back in his chair. "I turned down a consulting job. Private security. Good pay. And I signed up to guide seasonal hikers. Forest Service subcontract. No gun. Just maps and weather." Emily smiled. "You're choosing peace." "I'm choosing presence. Time 350s. He corrected. Rex shifted, then slowly pushed himself upright, bracing carefully. He took a few tentative steps toward the door, then stopped, looking back at them. Caleb stood. "Come on." They stepped outside together. The sky had cleared, revealing stars sharp enough to cut. The air smelled clean. Pine, cold earth, promise. Rex stood between them, leaning slightly into Caleb's leg, then into Emily's. Not choosing, including. Emily felt something loosen in her chest. Not happiness. Something steadier. Belonging. Winter loosened its grip inch by inch. Snow thinned along the south-facing slope, revealing dark earth beneath, and the creek found its voice again. Soft at first, then confident, like it had waited long enough to speak. Emily stood at the edge of the clearing with a small bouquet in her hands. Nothing extravagant. Wildflowers gathered from lower ground, where spring had arrived early. Their colors muted, but determined. She wore a simple coat, boots dusted with mud instead of snow. The air smelled of thaw and pine resin. Rex stood beside her, harness snug, weight shifted carefully onto his good leg. The limp was still there, probably always would be. But he carried it without complaint, tail moving in a slow, content rhythm. His ears twitched at every sound, cataloging the world the way he always had. Caleb approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt the moment. He stopped a few steps back, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes on the place where the snow had once been stained red. They didn't speak. Emily knelt and placed the flowers at the base of a young pine. The ground was soft enough to accept them. She rested her palm against the trunk for a moment, steadying herself. "This is where everything changed," she said at last. Caleb nodded. "And where it stopped?" She looked up at him. "I still hear it sometimes. The shot. The silence after." "Me too," he said. "It fades." Rex stepped forward and sniffed the flowers, then sat, posture straight, as if standing watch over a memory that deserved guarding. Emily smiled through the tightness in her chest. "I used to think survival meant outrunning the past," she said. "Now I think it means letting it stand where it happened." Caleb considered that. "Echoes don't go away," he said. "They just get quieter when you build something new around them." They walked back toward the cabin together, boots crunching lightly on the last patches of ice. The structure looked different now, warmer somehow. Reinforced windows installed by a local contractor. Subtle security upgrades Caleb had engineered with Mason's help. Not a fortress. Just enough. Inside, sunlight pooled across the floor. Emily's sketches lay spread across the table. Plans for compact homes designed for aging in place. Sustainable materials. Layouts that prioritized safety without feeling like cages. She'd taken on her first remote client last week, a retired couple looking to downsize without giving up dignity. Caleb checked his email once a day now. Times 200 moms. Trail conditions. Weather advisories. Liability waivers for guided hikes. Practical things. Honest work. Rex settled near the door, content to watch. That evening, they cooked together without speaking much. There was no need. The quiet had learned to behave itself. Outside, the sky turned amber, then violet. The kind of light photographers wait their whole lives to catch. Emily broke the silence. "I got another message from the attorneys." Caleb glanced up. "Anything new?" "Nathan took a plea," she said. "Federal time. Asset forfeiture. His family's development company is dissolving. There will be civil payouts, medical expenses, restitution funds, long-term care coverage." Caleb nodded. "Good." She hesitated. "They asked if I wanted to make a statement. Media, interviews, thought leadership on corporate accountability. And I said no, she replied. I don't need to be a symbol. I just want to live. Caleb smiled faintly. That might be the strongest statement there is. Later they stepped onto the porch. Night settled gently over the mountain, stars bright and unbothered by human concerns. Rex lay between them, time 300 breathing slow and steady, his body a warm, solid presence. Emily leaned on the railing. I don't know what comes next, she said. Caleb didn't answer right away. He watched the tree line sway, listened to the creak. Next isn't a single thing, he said. It's a series of choices. Small ones. She nodded. Then I choose this. Tonight. This place. Rex's tail thumped once as if in agreement. The echo remained. Of danger. Of loss. Of a life that almost ended on a mountain road. But it no longer owned the silence. The silence belonged to them now. What helps you move forward after everything changes? 1. Remembering. 2. Rebuilding. 3. Letting go. Comment 1, 2, or 3 below. Spring arrived without ceremony. No announcement. No promise. Just the quiet insistence of green pushing through brown. Of light lingering a little longer each evening. Caleb noticed it in the small ways. Mud replacing ice on the trail. Birds returning to the eaves. Rex insisting on longer walks despite the stiffness that still caught his back leg. Emily noticed it in herself. She no longer woke with her heart racing. Nightmares came less often, and when they did, they passed like weather instead of storms. She worked most mornings at the table by the window, drafting plans for clients she'd never meet in person. Retirees, small business owners, families planning safe, efficient homes that felt lived in. Purpose replaced urgency. Design replaced fear. They didn't talk about labels, not about what they were to each other, or what they might become. The absence of the conversation wasn't avoidance. It was respect. Both had survived a version of love that demanded ownership. Neither wanted to recreate it. One afternoon, Emily followed Caleb along the lower ridge trail, Rex moving ahead at his measured pace. The dog stopped often, sniffing new growth, recalibrating the world one scent at a time. Caleb let him. Time had learned to bend around Rex's rhythm. You don't miss it? Emily asked, breaking the quiet. The old life? Caleb considered the question longer than necessary. I miss the clarity, he said. Not the noise. She nodded. I miss who I thought I was going to be. He glanced at her. And who are you now? Emily watched Rex navigate a shallow stream, careful but determined. Someone who chooses, she said, not someone chosen for. They reached a flat overlook where the valley opened wide. Caleb sat on a fallen log, stretching his hands, joints stiff from years of weather and work. Emily sat beside him, close enough to share warmth, but not expectation. I had a ring once, she said suddenly. Diamond. Cold. Heavy. Caleb didn't respond. I don't want another one, she continued. Not because I don't believe in commitment, because I believe it should be quieter than that. Caleb looked out across the land. Commitment shows up, he said, every day, even when nobody's watching. Rex returned and settled at their feet, resting his head against Caleb's boot. The dog's breathing synced with the wind, steady, uncomplicated. That evening, the town gathered for a modest fundraiser at the community hall. Trail maintenance, wildlife rehabilitation, local healthcare support. Emily attended with Caleb, standing beside him without being introduced as anything more than herself. People asked about her work, about Rex, about the cabin improvements. No one pried. No one pushed. On the drive home, Emily watched the headlights trace the familiar road. This place, she said, it doesn't ask you to perform. Caleb nodded. That's why I stayed. They parked, shut off the engine, and sat for a moment in the dark. The cabin light glowed ahead, warm, waiting. Inside, Rex headed straight for his bed, circling once before collapsing with a satisfied grunt. Emily smiled, then turned to Caleb. There are things I don't say, she said, because I don't want to trap them with words. Caleb met her gaze. Some things breathe better that way. They stood there, close, the space between them full rather than empty. No promises spoken, no future outlined. Just the shared understanding that staying was a choice renewed daily. Outside, the mountains settled into night, and for once nothing needed defending.